So, thank you for having me all here. It's actually the third year in a row that I've spoken at UTmessan, which is a great honor. Always good to have a free trip back to Iceland. So, every year I've also already spoken from a different company as well, so this is a new one, Duo Security. So, who am I? My name's Rich Smith. I'm Director of R&D at Duo Labs, running teams of researchers there that do pure security research. I'm also a co-founder of Syndis. You're in the security track. Pretty much all security talks are given by Syndis in Iceland, we learn. And I've been working in the security industry for over 15 years. Most of my background is offensive, bits and pieces of defensive work, lots of operational work, a lot of background in pen testing, a lot of attack tooling, and taking all of this diverse perspectives on security and kind of continue to build that into my practice of how I think about developing new security solutions. So Duo, I realize that it's not a well-known company in Iceland. Probably the big takeaway is we do all of the authentications. 2FA is what we're known for. Usable security is what we're known for. I won't bore you with a product pitch. That's not what we're here for. We don't just authenticate users. We do devices. We do apps. We do all the granular policy control. If you want to find out more, chat to me afterwards. More interestingly, Duo Labs, what do? We do all of the fun work. We do all of the stuff to look over the horizon, experiment with new things, play with new technology, and not have to worry about actually productizing it. There's a whole different group of people that productize that at Duo. They're far better engineers than I am. We just hack on the fun stuff. We have the ideas. We find out what works and what doesn't, and then we move on to the next one. Actually making money from it, somebody else's problem. I'm not a money maker. So, with all of that background out of the way, what are we talking about today? Well, we're going to talk about authentication, and in particular 2FA, a lot of the misconceptions around it. Last year I spoke about security culture and developing a positive and progressive security culture, and if you want to be developing a positive security culture, you've got to have security that's actually usable by people. If it's a barrier and people hate using it, they're not going to use it, and therefore they're going to try and circumvent the security culture that you're putting in place. I'm also going to kind of throw caution to the wind and make some future predictions in public, which are never, ever going to go wrong. So before we dive into all about 2FA, we really need to think about what the A is. So authentication versus authorization. A lot of people in this room are in the security track, so I'm going to hope that people know the difference, but I'm not going to make that assumption. And you also, out on the internet, see these acronyms, AuthN and AuthZ. One is short for authentication, one is short for authorization. Lots of people just say auth. If you say auth, no one knows what you mean. Completely different things. So what is authentication? Process of verifying the identity of a user, a device, or a process. More simply put, proving you are who you say you are. Authorization, the function of specifying access rights to resources. Simply put, allowing you to access the things that you should access. Simple concepts, ground stones for the rest of the talk. So, authentication, authorization, different things. Let's get it in our heads. So, all the prerequisites out of the way. I'm here from a security vendor. I'm going to give you some warnings about the security industry. The security industry is dysfunctional. It is full of FUD. It doesn't work very well. I should know. I've worked in it for my entire professional career. The security industry sucks. You cannot buy your way to security. No matter what your vendors tell you, you cannot buy your way to security. And I do have a colleague from Duo, so close your ears. Even if you buy Duo, you can't just buy your way to security. Jonas, you can listen again. So, what's the security industry telling you to do? Defense in depth. We must all have heard that term. You want layer after layer after layer after layer of security because, well, you're just hitting and hoping. There's so many threats, there's so many things that you don't know. If you have all of the layers, a little bit of luck, then you might stay secure. All of those words in this kind of map, all things that you've probably bought or someone's tried to sell you. I actually think it's just expense in depth. Most of the products that people are selling you via the security industry are at a price that you can't afford, will have operational requirements that you cannot meet, are ineffective or just outright useless, will require a security team that you do not have, and really just add complexity into your environment that can introduce more insecurity. Complexity is the enemy of security. You'll hear a lot about orchestration. Orchestration, fancy word for buy more crap to manage the crap that you've already bought. not a friend of security. If you want to be more secure, reduce your complexity. If you reduce your complexity, you will reduce your attack surface. If you reduce your attack surface, you will be more secure. If you don't believe me, believe Justin Hsu. Justin Hsu is way smarter than I am. A guy on the security team at Google. If you don't follow him on Twitter, you should. He's a very, very smart guy. This is probably the best quote of security, actually summarizing what the truth about security is that I've seen. Focus on reducing your attack surface. Roll the dice with the rest of the 10%. Cross your fingers, you should be fine. If you're going to start the year with any kind of rule of thumb, and this may seem strange coming from a security vendor, but you'll also realize I said I don't make the company any money. It's probably why. Don't buy any security products unless it allows you to decommission to others. If you go forward with this year and the next year with that in mind, you'll be getting yourself to a better place. Also, don't invest in these products that create busy work. Now, the team will look busy, you'll feel that you're doing the security thing. A lot of the time, you're not. If it's not making your life easier, get rid of it. If it's listing out thousands of vulnerabilities across multiple different applications that you do or don't know what the impact is from, what use is it? It's all reactionary. Move away from those security products that are just generating workload for you to make you look busy because you're not actually getting yourself any more secure. Put simply, just by buying more products, you're not going to buy yourself more security. So, with that highly optimistic start to the talk, what should we worry about? There's a lot of threats out there. We've already saw that big word map, and all those things are trying to address various threats. What should you be worrying about? Ignore O-days. Definitely the stuff that you hear about in the media. Unknown vulnerabilities in software that isn't patched. For most people in this room, and for most people sitting anywhere, O-days are not your biggest concern. Don't over-index on them. Trying to fight them will mean that you're not putting your effort elsewhere, and you will end up less secure. Ignore APTs. You'll hear it throughout the industry, APT this, APT that. APT is a completely industry-made-up term. It was made up by a vendor. It was a sales marketing pitch, and now it's become vocabulary for everything that you should be scared of. Mostly it's bullshit. This is the kind of headlines that you see. Cyber war and the aggressive industry messaging that are telling you that you need to be fearful. There's fear, there's uncertainty, there's doubt. There's people telling you that the cyber apocalypse is coming, that you need to be militaristic in the way that you think about your security. Approaching security in a militaristic sense is the antithesis of simplicity. It introduces complexity. While it's fun to read all this, the reality of how it affects you on a day-to-day basis, so far, polar opposites. This is not the stuff that you should be worrying about. If you're buying products to address this, you're buying the wrong products. And all of this focus on kind of hyper-aggressive, militarized security misses the point. It misses the focus of end users. It misses the point of making security usable. If security is usable, people will use it. The name says it all. APT, average phishing technique. That's how most people are going to be compromised. Phishing, not some 400-pound hacker that sat in the basement for 6 months doing memory corruption exercises against your specific application. He's going to send in 3 emails to your CEO, well-crafted, they'll click, they'll open, job done. This is from the Verizon breach report. Take all statistics with a grain of salt. Take all statistics from the security industry with a tablespoon of salt. But these are pretty good. 95% of breaches involve compromised credentials. 75% of breaches involve compromised devices. From my time as a pen tester, from my time as a red team person, this matches my experience. How many times did we go from full internet to internal network access via some crazy O-day? I can think of a few times, like less than 5 in my entire attack career. How do we normally get in? Phishing, because it's almost guaranteed to work. Or we found credentials that were leaked somewhere. Someone had pushed out their AWS key onto GitHub, or they had leaked their PG password into GitHub, or they left a directory listing open and we could snuff a file from that. Most of the time, our initial breach was through a stolen credential in some way, shape, or form. Excuse me. And if you don't believe me, believe Rob Joyce. Probably over the last few weeks, he might not be at the White House anymore, we'll see. But this is the chief of the NSA TAO. And he's talking, I mean, he knows about nation-state hackers. This is what they deal with all the time. And even he's saying credentials are the king. He is saying credentials are what attackers are going after. You know, and this, again, lots of people thinking that, you know, nation-states are running 0 days, but there's so many easier ways that you can get in. And if we look back at the Grizzly Step reports that have come out over the last couple of months to do with the US presidential election and the you know, assertion that there was influence coming from Russia on that, did they do that by 0 days in the voting machines and compromising votes and changing vote tallying? Nope. Nope. They compromise people by phishing, and then they use that intelligence in classic information warfare style to swing the opinion of a populace. Phishing and credentials are key when you're thinking about security. So, if credentials are really what the attacker's focusing on, what the hell are we to do? You know, this talk hasn't started off all happiness and unicorns, but we can do some stuff. It should be pretty obvious, either from the first few slides or your knowledge of the industry in general. We've long passed the time that passwords are an appropriate way to secure really anything of sensitivity. Now, this doesn't mean that you should just abandon passwords and have everything as 1, 2, 3, 4. There are definitely some good things you can do with your passwords, but don't rely on them 100%. The best advice that I can give for passwords comes from XKCD. It wouldn't be a security talk if you didn't have a picture from XKCD. And for those people who haven't seen this one before, I mean, it's a bit of a classic. Top left is the password that you're told is secure. And, you know, it's not easy to remember. That's the whole point, apparently, make it hard to remember. Got some entropy calculations. You know, doesn't take long to guess that password. Very difficult to remember. 4 words slapped together in a way that you might be able to form a picture in your mind. Far higher entropy, far more resistant to brute forcing, far better password. Simple, right? Well, it seems that not everybody reads XKCD. You'll see these kind of character requirements or password requirements across all sorts of different sites. I'll be honest, I can't even really remember where these two have come from. I've got like a whole directory full of these stupid things. But you can see that this is not really anything to do with usable security. This one's my favorite. I'm not going to read through the whole list because we would take up the rest of the time of the talk. But that's just fucking crazy. That's nuts. And so there's all these guidelines, 8 guidelines with subsections, and then it gives you some examples at the bottom. So there's all of these guidelines telling you what to and not to do. I spent my entire life in security. I don't understand some of those bullet points. And the real kicker, those 5 examples it gives you at the bottom, copy, paste them, and put them in as a password, it accepts them. What do you think the 5 passwords are that people use? The ones that are provided? Yeah. Come on. So, 2FA. We've finally got some authentication. 2FA can help cover shortfalls in passwords. So if your password is weak for a whole variety of reasons, if you lose control of your password, you can lose control of your password by being phished, as we gave the example earlier of people trying to get your credentials. You can also lose control of your password through no fault of your own. You know, you have passwords that are stored with all sorts of different service providers, and if they're compromised, depending on how they have treated your password may be compromised. And if you use that password on other sites, then the standard mode of operation is you'll get a huge trove of passwords or hashes and then crack them. And then you'll get the username password pairs, and you'll try it on every single other site that you can, and lots of the time you'll be able to log in as the other person. This happens day in, day out. When I was running security at Etsy, we faced this kind of attack is called mass account takeover, or mass ATO. We face this attack all of the time. I mean, thousands upon thousands upon thousands of times an hour. We could see the same word list of leaked passwords being tried against Etsy for people trying to log in as, you know, does this person have an account on Etsy? Were they using the same passwords? If you were following the news kind of during last year, there was 3 pretty huge credential leaks. There was one from LinkedIn, there was one from Dropbox, and then Yahoo finished the year on a high by devaluing their company's worth a little bit more. Tens of millions of password pairs leaked, and so many accounts were compromised off the back of those. I'm not going to go too much into user authentication versus transaction authentication. We need a bit of a longer talk to do that. But the point being, there's lots of ways which passwords fall flat. With that as an understanding, using a second factor can help in these scenarios. If your password is compromised, even when it's not your own fault, having a second factor can help reassure you. It can be that safety net. But one of the things that's really not been done justice is, in the industry and in the media particularly, 2FA is kind of treated as equivalent. 2FA is 2FA is 2FA. Unfortunately, it's not. There are a variety of different implementations of 2FA, and they all come with their own kind of pros and cons, upsides and downsides. So we're going to look a little bit into that just to try and give like a 100-foot overview of this. This is kind of a shortened version of a 60-minute talk where we go much, much deeper into the actual technology and the algorithms behind these. But hold back, don't worry, you're not being subjected to a computer science lecture today. So the difference, I was saying, not every 2FA implementation is the same, and a great case in point is SMS-based 2FA. Quick show of hands, who here has kind of used or is currently using 2FS? I'll start again. SMS-based 2FA. A smattering of hands. Okay, cool, more hands, great. So we've all seen it. You get a code sent to your phone, you put the code in the little box, that's your second factor, you log in. Great. NIST published some guidelines about mid last year, I think July it was. And they, in a typical NIST fashion, their report wasn't particularly easy to understand in terms of language, but we'll go into it. But this is a snippet from that report, essentially saying that they were deprecating their support of SMS as a two-factor method, particularly over a public switch telephone network. We can get into the details, but takeaway is, SMS is being deprecated. They're not supporting it and saying it's secure anymore. The reasons with that really were twofold in the majority, and we're kind of simplifying it a little bit, but it all came down to the interception of those codes that were sent through SMS. That interception can happen in a number of ways. The fact that VoIP numbers are not being differentiated from true mobile devices allows people to, in a programmatic way, intercept codes that are being sent. And that in combination with a lot of the ways that SMS 2FA was implemented at a service provider, where a phone number could be changed without the requirement for 2FA to be completed before that change was made, meant that there were a number of attacks that people were changing the phone numbers associated with an account to point at a VoIP number and then automatically ingesting the code that came over VoIP in a programmatic way and then using that to fill in the box and log in, therefore bypassing 2FA. There's some other factors around this. Commonly, people will have phones that show the message on their lock screen, and so even if somebody's lost their device, someone picks it up, you can see the code that comes in. Long story short, SMS is bad. So with this bombshell, and it hit all the media, it got a huge amount of media coverage, both mainstream and technical press. How did the world respond? I'm pretty sure you all know, but I'm going to go show you a graph anyway. So this is a graph of tens, probably hundreds of millions of authentications that Duo sees through all of the different customers that we have. Different colored lines, different factors of authentication. The green vertical line up there, roughly when the NIST guidance went out. And as you can all see, the gray line, which is voice, and the red line, which is SMS, there was a huge response from the public on this advice from a group of people that were there to protect them to stop using SMS. Yeah, not a blind bit of difference. This is me judging you, like no change at all. So if SMS 2FA is bad, for those reasons that we kind of skimmed over pretty quickly, what are the alternatives that you've got? What other 2FA can you approach, and what are its pros and cons? I am the first to admit the world of authentication is a goddamn mess of acronyms. It's horrible. Like, I work in this world, and multiple times a day I'll say the wrong acronym. Probably multiple times in this talk I'll say the wrong acronym. So you've got two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication, two-step authentication, two-factor verification, two-step verification, and on and on and on and on and on. And these will be different brand names for different things. For most intents and purposes that you care about, these are all the same. It just means don't use password alone. Don't get too hung up on all of these 2FA, MFA things. Don't worry about it. It just means don't use password alone. This is a cheat sheet. I am not going to walk you through every one of them. Again, you're getting the short version of the lecture, not the long version. Things particularly to point out, if you're going to Google anything off this list, Google FIDO and Google U2F, that is my highest recommendation in terms of 2FA. We'll come on to that a little bit more. But this is more for you to take away at home, and you can play buzzword bingo. We're going to dip in a little bit into the most common types of 2FA that you're going to meet. We've already spoken a little bit about SMS and voice, so we're going to dip into the others. But remember, they're not all equivalent. You know, there's some pros and some cons with them all. So OTP, one-time passwords. I'm going to guess this is another 2FA factor that you're pretty familiar with. Google Authenticator app, Duo's app does the same thing. The Earth Kenny tokens, exactly the same thing. A number that changes over time or on per authentication. Put in the number, shows you've got the device with the seed. There's a standards body, the Initiative for Open Authentication, or OAuth. I don't know how the acronym goes to the name of the thing, but whatever, that's what they call themselves. There are proprietary implementations of OTP as well. RSA's implementation is the most obvious one. The two main flavors of OAuth OTP, HMAC-based OTP and time-based OTP. Time-based OTP is really a specific case of HMAC-based OTP, where time is used as one of the inputs to the HMAC. Again, you're lucky. We would go deep into the maths in this. You're getting off easy. Really, a big thing to take away from this, if you take away nothing else, we're going to run over, is that you and the service provider share the secret. So it's symmetric cryptography. I have a secret, you have a secret. We can both put that same secret into an algorithm, and we can work out whether the number that I give you as my second factor calculates the same. A lot of hand-wavy math going on there, but we'll roll with that. The downside with that is, if that secret is compromised from you or from the provider, then someone can impersonate your second factor. That's a big deal. Pros and cons. OTP is widely supported. It's supported in hard tokens, which is great. There's lots of environments where the use of hard tokens rather than a phone makes sense, like SCIFs and call centers. OAuth is widely standardized and accepted everywhere. Soft tokens are essentially free, easy to settle with QR codes. Cons, very susceptible to being phished. As I said, based on a shared secret. Sometimes you can desynchronize in terms of if it's a time-based system, or if it's a hot-key system, you can desynchronize, and so then you have to kind of resynchronize. It can be a bit of a pain. And as anyone who has used RSA tokens in the past, hard tokens are a real pain in the ass. So, OTP is good, but there's some shortcomings. Push notifications, this is Duo-specific technology that we patented, yay. Basically, adding on a different way of doing OTP. So you get sent a push notification, and you can choose to approve or deny. Little screen there, you approve, you deny. If you deny, you can also alert your admin that, like, hey, I got this push notification for an authentication, and I didn't initiate that authentication. Go and look into it. You also get a bunch of context about the authentication attempt. It's great. It's more secure for a variety of reasons. The biggest one that we're going to focus on is there isn't that shared secret. This uses asymmetric cryptography. There's a private key. It's kept on the device. The service provider has the public key. If the service provider is compromised, you can't be impersonated. That's a pretty big deal for particular security environments. There are some downsides to it. Does require a smartphone, does require you to have an internet connection. Again, pros and cons depending on what you're trying to secure and what environment you're in. Universal second factor. This is my favorite. This is my favorite, hands down. This is actually 2FA designed to understand how we use the web today. It's defined in an open alliance by the FIDO Alliance. You don't need to type a passcode. Probably the most popular implementation of it is YubiKeys by Yubico. And this is kind of what the protocol looks like. Again, a little bit of a higher level abstraction of it, but the point being it's a challenge response protocol. So you put in your username and password. If that's correct, then the service provider, let's say Google, verifies your password, generates a challenge, sends that challenge back to you. The browser has some bindings. You don't need drivers. It links into a U2F device, let's say in this case a YubiKey, and that YubiKey will test for user presence. This means that it's not a pure software-driven device. You need to dib the user key. You press it, it flashes, you press it, you show that you are there. That can't be done in software. There's no Trojans or anything on the system that can be used to impersonate that. It requires a physical action from you. Upon that physical action, there's a secure element in the YubiKey. The challenge that comes in is then signed by the private key that's kept securely. You send back the response, the signed challenge. The service provider verifies that. If that verifies, great, you've shown your second factor. To the user, it just looks much simpler. There's a box that pops up that says, touch the thing that's flashing, you touch the thing that's flashing, second factor done. I give a whole kind of hour, 90-minute talk just on U2F, so to say that we're skimming the surface on this is definitely an understatement. It's highly resistant to phishing. It's got incredibly high requirements in terms of user privacy. A service provider cannot associate any accounts to actual one U2F token. They are completely blind, which gives lots and lots of benefits in terms of privacy, and in certain environments such as human rights abuses, this can be key. There is no shared secret, as I said. It's asymmetric crypto. Again, so if a service provider is compromised, your authentication isn't going to be, you're not going to be impersonated. It's good UX as well, very easy to do. Tap the thing that's flashing. There are lots of different ways it can be embodied, from the YubiKey over USB through like Bluetooth Low Energy and a variety of different embodiments. It's an open standard, so people, as long as they're sticking to the algorithms, can go to town on how they implement it. It's very, very, very flexible. There are some cons. It's not as widely supported by service providers yet, but it's definitely on the increase. If you saw that graph that I did before, what might have looked like an x-axis along the bottom, that was actually the percentage of people using U2F. It's about 1 to 2% of all of our millions of auths. We're trying to up that, but it's definitely slower in adoption. Obviously, we support it, Google support it, GitHub support it, Dropbox support it. There are a lot of other people that support it, but in terms of compared to SMS or OTP, it's definitely a smaller player. There can be some capital expenses, costs in with this as well, depending on the embodiment that you choose, but we'll skip over that. So we blaze through probably about 3 lectures worth of 2FA. At least you've got some acronyms that you can go and Google. And so now this is the part where I make predictions about the future, and I come back next year and we all laugh at how wrong I was. So, the future of authentication. This is where I try and kind of convince Jonas that the wage that me and my team is getting paid is worthwhile. So what do I think the future of authentications look like? Well, let's understand that there's a fundamental shift, there's a paradigm shift in the way that technology is being used. Cloud computing, you hear about it everywhere. If you go down to the booths downstairs, I'm sure everyone will have some cloud word or another on their booth. And BYOD. Everyone loves BYOD because it reduces capital expenses of a business. Let's make the employees use their own devices. Yay, we're saving hundreds of dollars per person. How great is that? Both of these things together do create for an incredibly compelling paradigm shift of how technology is being used. I'm not against either of these things. What I'm saying is it fundamentally changes the way in which you need to think about authentication, because you don't manage the device anymore. You do not know necessarily what is running on that device, and there is a whole plethora of abstraction between the services that are running and the traditional and computing environments, which were racks and racks of servers that you controlled in a data center with military guards and things like that. In my opinion, the approach that is going to hold water with doing with authenticating in this world and being secure in this world of cloud and BYOD is the Beyond Corp approach. First proposed by Google. That's how they essentially have turned their network inside out, and all of their internal services are internet facing, and then they provide high-strength authentication of both devices, the health of those devices, and users to provide granular access control to specific applications. Google Beyond Corp, there are some very, very good papers there. I'm getting the red card. Beyond Corp is definitely the way forward. We've got some stuff that we're doing in Beyond Corp. Come and chat to me afterwards if you like to know more about it. Passwordless authentication is also going to continue to be a huge thing. Sorry, begin to be a huge thing. UAF, Universal Authentication Framework, also from the FIDO Alliance, is going to be the way in which this really embodies and is used across the industry. As with any standards, there's got to be more than one standard for the same thing. UAF, FIDO 2.0, and WebAuthn, they're all really variations on the same thing. Again, we can talk about that afterwards. Google those terms, you'll be able to kind of dig through the weeds. And device authentication is going to be becoming more and more important, and there's lots of new hardware that is being released to help with this, to be able to strongly attest to the security and the health of a device. TPM2s have been around for a while. With the new Apple Touch Bar MacBooks that were released, they also released, in that was a coprocessor, a secure enclave, the T1 secure enclave, that actually essentially is the same thing that's been in the iPhone for a while, but now on laptops. Intel Secure Guard extensions, SGX, they're coming down the line. Think of that as a YubiKey smooshed into a processor. There's lots and lots and lots of new hardware which is coming out to allow passwordless authentication, and that helps us circumvent all of that pain that we spoke about with passwords. All of this together means that you can do highly granular access control policies. So, wrapping it up, you take away things like good things that you can do. Use 2FA. I told you I get acronyms wrong. Use 2FA. Even if it's SMS, it's better than nothing. It's better than a single password. If you've got assets that are personal to you, services that are personal to you, that you're not securing with 2FA, please enable 2FA. It's free. If you work in a company and you don't have 2FA as part of your business of accessing your company systems, please look at ways that you can implement that. It's going to be the biggest thing that you can do to secure your company. It's probably going to be the biggest ROI in terms of spend on security that you can make. Lots of times, you might even be able to get away with it for free. If you're going down the path of 2FA, consider going down the path of U2F. It really is an incredibly compelling way to do a second factor. There's lots and lots of implementations. It's really not very expensive. Treat yourself to a YubiKey. They're like $20. So there's no reason that you can't do it if you're living your life on the internet, invest in a YubiKey. And please, password protect your phones. Obviously, there's the soft tokens, there's the OTP authenticators, and there's SMS messages that are coming in. That's all pretty ineffective if you don't have a passcode on your phone. Big, high-level takeaways. Don't try and buy your way to security. You will fail. Be skeptical of anything a vendor tells you about security. Ask them for the data. Ask them difficult questions. Don't take their word for it. Understand the properties of the things that you are buying and how it affects you and your business. Don't assume that the use case that they are selling you actually applies to your business. Read between the lines. Do your homework. Put your heavy focus on just getting the basics right. Manage your passwords, have strong passwords, do some 2FA, reduce your attack surface, reduce your complexity. Just get the basics right. Basic security hygiene is going to get you 90% of the way to where you need to be. And understand there are a lot of differences between different 2FAs, and choose the one that makes the most sense for you, given on your use case. And the final thing, if you got breached tomorrow, and then you look back and said, what would you change? Think about that and make that change today, and you're going to be in a better place. 34 minutes, that's a lot better than I thought I was going to do. Tack för det. I can do questions, yeah, for sure.
We've run out of time. There's lunch now, but He's around for questions if anybody wants. You can huddle around or you can just chime in. Huddling around may be better.
Sure. Let's huddle.
Thank you. Have
Thank you very
lunch
much.
and enjoy the rest of the UTmess.